Welcome to Man in America. I'm your host, Seth Holhouse. So one of the main things I like doing on this show, especially when I do shows like this, which are what I call a solo show, just me presenting my own research, is whenever there's a big event happening, I try to find the patterns. I try to find those parts of the event that my gut says something is not right there. And then I research, and I may not have the exact answer as to what's behind that event. But oftentimes, I think that the research I put together points to a particular picture of what might really be going on right here. And so right now, we're kind of coming down from this very, very tragic event that happened out in Idaho, where there's a forest fire. First responders went, police and firemen went. And instead of being met with, people saying, please save me, my house is on fire, they were met with sniper fire. And so what we have come to understand is that the fire was intentional, and the fire was used as a way to lure these first responders into the woods where they could then be shot. So I'm first going to start looking at what is the bigger picture? What is the more mainstream narrative looking like with this? And then we're going to be diving into the inconsistencies and then looking for patterns and seeing how this ties into a lot of the other bigger issues that are happening, not just in our country, but around the world. So start with this article right here, New York Post article. This is from today. So Wes Rowley is this guy's name. Supposedly the lone gunman, right, is Wes Rowley. It says, Wes Rowley, alleged sniper accused of setting Idaho fire before killing two firefighters, ID'd an eerie photo. So I'll read a little bit to give a little bit of background, just to kind of set the stage for what we're going to be talking about today. So it says here, the sniper who shot dead two firefighters in an ambush in Idaho was identified by officials Monday as 20-year-old Wes Rowley. And there's his picture right there. They see he has an eerie stare. Okay. It says Rowley's body was found near his weapon at the scene of a fire he started Sunday afternoon to lure unsuspecting smoke eaters. I'm not sure what that smoke eaters, that's the first time coming across that, to the scene. A law enforcement official told AP he ended up killing two responding firefighters and critically wounding a third. It's unclear whether he was killed by a cop's bullet or took his own life. Now it continues on here. So one thing to note is the guy's 20 years old. So he's young. Okay. Just to note. Okay. So continuing down here, it says that the chaos began around 2 p.m. On Canfield Mountain, just north of, I think it's pronounced Coeur d'Alene, when smoke started pouring from the woods and the first responders rushed to the scene only to be met by a hail of gunfire coming from the trees. They quickly realized they'd been lured into a trap and desperately called for backup. Now, kind of continuing here, there's a few things that start to look odd, okay, to say the least. So it says a motivation behind the twisted attack remains unclear, but internet sleuths have identified a chilling possible connection to a decades-old incident involving the Coeur d'Alene Fire Department and neo-Nazis. So this is interesting. This shooting happened on the anniversary, right? So 24 years ago. So it says Sunday's incident happened 24 years to the day after a 2001 burning of an Aryan Nations compound in Hayden Lake, just 7 miles north of the town, during a fire training operation. The cabin and its compound had been sold to the department after the Aryan Nations national leader, Richard Butler, filed for bankruptcy over the settlement involving the shooting of a Native American woman and her son. And they burnt down the site. So, okay, so it's interesting that, of course, the media, they love this. They love jumping to the immediate conclusion that this guy's a Nazi, right? This guy's probably some alt-right skinhead Nazi. But, so they burned the former headquarters, whatever it was, of the Aryan Nation down 24 years ago. This guy's only 20 years old. So that was 4 years before he was even born, which is interesting. I mean, it's one thing if you could say that, okay, look, here's the guy, he's a known skinhead, he's 50 years old, he had close ties to the Aryan Nation, he was one of the original people there. It's like, okay, that would make sense. But this is just a little bit strange, but it gets way more strange, okay? It gets way more strange than this. So let's continue with this article here. So suspect in Idaho firefighter ambush identified as Wes Rowley. It's a different coverage from NBC. Now, it says here the suspect's grandfather said that he wanted to be a firefighter and that something must have snapped for him to have committed such an attack. So continuing here, it says the suspect believed to fatally shoot 2 firefighters and wounded a third was identified as 20-year-old man who says his family says he dreamed of becoming a firefighter himself. So it says that Wes Val Rowley, who I guess is actually Russian in origin. I haven't confirmed that. I saw that being shared around online that he was actually Russian. Now, that would probably help the mainstream narrative even more to say, oh, he was a Russian skinhead. Okay, but is that the truth? Now, what's interesting, though, is that they're saying here that this guy wanted to be a firefighter. It says that he really respected law enforcement. This, I think, his grandfather saying he loved firefighters. It didn't make sense that he was shooting firefighters. Maybe he got rejected or something. Now, I won't roll out here, okay, in looking at this. I won't immediately roll out that he truly was a lone gunman, okay, that he just was some kid that was probably on some sort of SSRIs and he was on medication for his depression because he was picked on, and maybe it was some sort of MK Ultra lone gunman, perhaps. Okay, or maybe not MK Ultra, maybe just some dude that is just stressed, right? Life is really stressful right now. Our country is very tense. So maybe he spent his life dreaming of being a firefighter, and then it didn't happen for some reason. It says that I think he was only 5'8". Maybe he was too short to be a firefighter. Maybe he got really angry and thought, well, the solution to this, because I love firefighters and I can't be a firefighter, my solution is to start a forest fire and then kill the firefighters. Now, again, there's lots of crazies out there, but it just seems a little bit odd. Now, the other thing with this is that my first response to this was that this is some sort of, these are whoever was behind, this is before they identify the subject, the suspect, which, keep in mind, they say they found his body, right? So we have no idea who was really doing this. Now, they say that they found it, and they may have found his body, but they could have killed this kid 2 days ago and taken him up there and dropped his body and caught it on fire and said, oh, look, here's his body, and it burned. I mean, again, they found his body, but does that mean he was the only shooter? I mean, it's a convenient thing to say he was the only shooter. I mean, but you look at the similarities between this and, say, the Butler, PA assassination attempt on President Trump. Again, young man, I think similar age, early 20s, lone gunman, right? Kind of no one's really sure what the motive is, but lone gunman. And now Butler, PA, that whole situation just reeked of false flag. I mean, it was, okay, was it the Secret Service was involved? I mean, were the intelligence agencies involved in a negative way? Foreign governments, we have no idea. But even going back to JFK's assassination, right, with Lee Harvey Oswald, again, lone gunman, right? So it just so happens to be there's a lone gunman who died. And aside from some, kind of strange social media posts which have been scrubbed from the internet, we have no idea, right? And we may never get to the bottom of this. So again, it just is a little bit strange. But when I first heard this story, my first thought was this is some sort of tactical unit, right? These are some sort of people. These are operators. Someone that can successfully start a forest fire, position themselves in a proper way, and be able to take out multiple people like this. I'll pull a post up from Laura Loomer here, which I think actually makes a lot of sense. She says, how does one scrawny 20-year-old who is built like a stick set a controlled wire fire, then orchestrate an ambush of police officers and firefighters and have perfect precision in a sniper fight, which resulted in 11 first responders being shot? I have lots of questions. And now she has lots of questions, but those questions might lead to the Mossad, which I'm not sure if she's willing to go down that route because it's just not her thing, is questioning things that might lead to the Mossad's involvement. But we'll get to that in a second here. But the thing is that she makes a good point. Because if you look at this, now, in one of the, I think it is the interview with his grandfather, perhaps, he said that he enjoyed hunting hogs. Now, it's entirely feasible that, this kid who's a 20-year-old, maybe he's been a hunter his whole life, and he's got a great deer rifle or whatever it is. I mean, I'm guessing that if he was up against a whole team of first responders and police and everything, he wasn't just shooting like a bolt action, deer gun, right? Probably you would think maybe he had some sort of AR-10 or something that, with interchangeable magazines or something. But of course, he could have just been, a single kid that had been hunting a lot of his life and was really good with a scoped rifle. Okay, like we'll put that out there. However, if you look at the fact that this supposedly one person held off whole teams of police. Now I'm saying these police, it's not their first rodeo. These aren't just, kind of stupid police running out there with a handgun or taking a knife to a gunfight type scenario. I'm sure that these police had their own SWAT teams. Maybe they had their own snipers. So the fact that he was able to hold them off. Now, granted, he did have the position, right? So he could have been in a ghillie suit, like very, very well secured up in a perfect perch. He could have completely mapped out this whole thing ahead of time and known exactly where he would need to sit, to stay concealed, to give him a good line of sight on all the targets coming up to put the fire out. But it just smelled like something that was more professional than that. I mean, even again, if you go back to the Butler, PA, like this kid just climbed up on a building, like in a crowded area with a ladder and sat up there, even though you've got snipers positioned all around with Trump and everything. And somehow they just missed this kid sitting up there with a long gun on top of a roof. What was it, like 100 feet or 100 yards away? Like even as 100 yards, it's an easy shot for someone that knows even half of what they're doing with the scoped rifle. There's all kinds of inconsistencies. It's like, that doesn't really make sense. So what is behind this though, right? So let's take a step back. And this is what I like to do, is I like to look at the exact situation and say, okay, something doesn't feel right. Now, what could it be? Let's take a step back and look at what are the bigger picture things that are moving here. Well, I'd say that the one thing that is the most just random, I guess I could say, piece of information is the sheriff that was the sheriff of this town. So I'm going to pull up this guy's Wikipedia page, not because I like Wikipedia for research, but actually there's a lot of stuff on there that is quite helpful that you can look at. I don't look at it to be the truth, but stuff like this is very good because you can see, okay, what's the background of this person? So the sheriff is named Robert Norris, okay? Now, Robert Norris, that's him right there. He is the 13th sheriff of, looks like Kootenai County, Idaho. Now, it says he's known for his role in February 2025 physical removal of this woman from a legislative town hall. Now, but what's interesting is, like, he seems like a pretty cool sheriff. Like, he opposed the mask mandates. It seems like was quite, or is, quite constitutional in his approach as a sheriff. But here's what's interesting. Okay, keep in mind, okay, we're looking at small town. Okay, here, let's just see real quick. This is the county. Okay, so it's 170,000 person county, right? So he's a sheriff of a pretty large county. Okay, but it's still just some random county in Idaho. It's not like that he's the sheriff in Orange County or some sort of major county, right? But looking back at his career, so it says says during Norris's career at the L.A. County Sheriff's Department. Actually, there you go. He came from L.A. County. His assignments included patrol, custody, narcotics, gangs, investigations, counterterrorism, emergency preparedness. Now, here's what's interesting. Following the September 11th attacks, Norris was selected to lead a team at the newly established Joint Regional Intelligence Center to assist the United States during the War on Terror. Now, here's where all my red flags start, these buzzers start going off. It's like, okay, what's going on here? Because when I see these events, my first thought is this a false flag? Now, a false flag doesn't mean it didn't happen. And that's actually one of the easy ways that a lot of people dismiss the idea of a false flag. You say, oh, it's a false flag. It's like, well, does that mean it's all made up? I'm like, no. Like, oftentimes false flags, they still happen. But the thing is that they're planned. A false flag, I think, if I'm not mistaken, it goes back to the like the pirate days, right? Where the pirate ships sailing out on the sea, they would raise up a flag of like, say, a British flag or a Spanish flag or whatever it was. They'd raise a false flag, which would allow them to get close and they pretend to be the good people, but they're actually the bad people, right? So false flags, in the nature of what a false flag is, it's about creating an event where you're disguising who actually causes the event, but also oftentimes the false flag event is used as a mean to create some sort of change that's happening around it, right? So that change could be, hey, we're going to rob you. But it could also be that, hey, we want a false flag event where, say that we can have some sort of particular shooting happen because that shooting coincides with gun laws, right? And it's like, oh, okay, well, there is a shooting. It's like looking at, there was the, you probably think your 401k is safe, that it's growing, that it'll be enough for your retirement. But what if it's not? Here's the truth most people never hear. Your 401k was never designed to make you wealthy. It was created in a corporate boardroom to shift retirement costs and investment risk onto you, designed to keep your money trapped, exposed to Wall Street crashes, inflation, and uncertainty you can't control until now. Right now, Americans are taking back control by turning to real assets like gold and silver. Noble Gold Investments has helped thousands protect their future by converting part of their retirement savings into physical gold and silver, so they can stop worrying about the market and start sleeping better at night. So talk to Noble Gold today and learn how safe and easy it is to roll over your 401k into a tax-advantaged precious metals IRA without penalties or headaches. Visit goldwithseth.com or call 626-654-1906 to get your free wealth protection kit, including a step-by-step guide to get started. It's time to get your money out of the danger zone and into something real. Again, that's 626-654-1906 or goldwithseth.com. I was looking at this recently. Remember there's the shooting, I think it was in Buffalo, New York. The guy went inside the grocery store and was shooting. And shortly after that shooting, Kathy Hochul, the governor of New York, she banned body armor, right? So literally, a private citizen living in New York State, you can't own body armor anymore because that one shooter had body armor on. So they're going to remove the right for every other citizen in New York that's law-abiding to protect themselves if there's a home invader or for whatever reason you feel like you would want to have body armor because of that one incident, right? Now, going back to this though, like one thing you see commonly in a lot of false flag events is that they are set up and they're run by the intelligence agencies or by the actual government itself, right? So if you're looking at this, September 11th, I would say September 11th was a very good example of a false flag, right? It was a controlled demolition of buildings that then enabled them to bring in the Patriot Act, have this war on terror to say, oh, look, it was Osama bin Laden. He was acting and he hated America. Death to America was what he was chanting as he was doing these things. So it creates this public response where people say, yes, please give us the Patriot Act, right? Take away our freedoms so we're protected from the next version of 9/11. That's exactly how these things oftentimes work. So continuing though, so this is just interesting that the sheriff just so happened to be on this Joint Regional Intelligence Center team during, for the war on terror. So it says he held a security clearance for sensitive compartmented information and was responsible for managing personnel and resources from local, state, and federal agencies, the FBI, the CIA, and the U.S. Attorney's Office. That's interesting. So the sheriff has these deep connections to the FBI and the CIA and the U.S. Attorney's Office, and he had held security clearance for the sensitive compartmented information and was responsible for managing personnel and resources from local, state, and federal agencies. But what's also interesting, it says, while established at JRIC, Norris was selected to train in Israel with Mossad and Shin Bet. And it says upon his return, he was promoted to lieutenant at the LSAD by former LA sheriff and convicted felon. Interesting. So after his career at the LASD ended, he moved to North Idaho, and he's been there ever since, it seems. So this is interesting, is that of all the, you think like, okay, small town Idaho, which I guess is not a small county, 170,000 people in a county, it's not tiny. However, the fact that the sheriff has deep ties with the FBI, the CIA, the Attorney's Office, but that he was also selected to train in Israel with Mossad and Shin Bet. So Shin Bet, if you're not, and you're probably familiar with Mossad. So the Shin Bet the Israeli Security Agency, so better known acronym it's Shabak or Shin Bet. It's basically Israel's internal security service. Okay, so between Mossad and the Shin Bet, it's basically like, roughly equivalent to the FBI and the CIA of Israel. I just find that, and again, I don't have a particular connection here. There's no more kind of to expose about this, but it just seems like an odd coincidence that the sheriff that's overseeing this response has such ties with the FBI, the CIA, Mossad, and Shin Bet. It just seems strange, okay? And the fact that this was done, this event happened on the 24-year anniversary to the day of when the Aryan Nation, the neo-Nazi organization, the Aryan Nation headquarters was burned down by the local firefighters, right? I think as a kind of, they were allowed to burn it down, right? Because at that point it had sold to a philanthropist who donated it to then burn it down, and they built a community center and probably some sort of like human rights event, exhibit or something there. But again, it's really, really, really interesting. But so taking a step back and looking at this, my thoughts are, I have a few different thoughts, and I'll continue, is that my first thought was like, okay, is this some sort of terror cell? Maybe this is something that kind of ties into Iran or China or Russia, right? Is this something that is some sort of like feds working together with Mossad to create a false flag event for some reason? It may as well could be. It's hard to say, but again, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. Now, I'll take a quick sidestep and just address something I'm seeing oftentimes in the comments. I find that what I see is that there are a lot of people that seem to look at things in very, very black and white ways, right? It's A or B. And I find that there's really kind of two camps of people. There are the camp of people that you call like the neocons, right? These are people that are constantly warning about China, warning about Russia, warning about communism, saying, look, we have to go to war. We have to protect Israel. Like it's very, very aligned with this kind of Western alliance, right? And then you have people that are the opposite of that basically say everything is Israel, everything is the United States deep state, and almost paint the picture that like Russia and China are innocent. Now, I see both sides of it, right? I see, and trust me, I've done plenty of research into Israel and Israel's involvement and the corruption over there. Even going back to the October 7th, I still look at the October 7th event as a false flag event, right? I believe they knew that was going to happen. Like they knew it. And it actually, that's a good example of a false flag event similar to Pearl Harbor, right? You have this event that happens that really did happen. A lot of people died, but that becomes a catalyst to push forward a much larger agenda of war on another nation, passing new laws of kind of stripping the freedoms away from the citizens of the country involved or whatever it is. And so if you kind of trace some of these things and you look at, again, going back to Israel and October 7th, it's like, okay, I certainly agree there's a lot of corruption there, right? Israel has a lot of control over our politicians. There's a lot of people that have become very famous lately because they're finally saying, look, they're willing to call out Israel, they're willing to call out the Jews. And okay, and look, I've gone down all those rabbit holes, and there's a lot of truth there. However, there's still a lot of good people in Israel, and there's still a lot of good Jews. I used to work with a lot of them. Okay, so it becomes, I think it's dangerous when we fall into this kind of trap where we think everything is A or B. It's like everything is this, everything is Israel and the Jews, or everything is China and the communists. Whereas again, I think that it's actually both sides. I think in a lot of ways, America is stuck in some sort of pincher movement. So the pincher movement is a war strategy where you're kind of hitting from both sides, right? Now, I think this is a little bit different because I think on one side, we've got the kind of the Zionists that, there's a whole agenda there, but then you also have the communists. So it's kind of funny, but how I've simplified it, it's kind of like it's the Zycoms and the Chicoms. You have two different sides of this pincher, which may completely be controlled by the same central people pulling the strings, right? The central bankers, the banking families, the Illuminati. As you get into these things, it's like, oh, okay, it kind of makes sense. So that's one perspective, is that both these two movements are being used simultaneously to kind of wrap their hands around the neck of America. But there's also a lot of people that as I mentioned, that they say, oh, well, Russia and China, they're just trying to be independent. They don't like the deep state. Well, in my opinion, those are also enemies of America. China specifically, which I'll get into in this show. And so I think that this could have been any number of things. It could have been, yes, some sort of, Fed, alphabet agency, CIA, Mossad operation. It could be that. It could be a lone gunner completely. It could be something that has ties to somehow to Iran or to the CCP or to Russia, potentially, right? That's also a potential. Right. But again, I don't like falling into that camp of this. It's either A or B, because I see people online that they've become like, as a way of becoming anti-Israel, they've become like pro-Iran and almost pro-communism, like pro-CCP. It's like, well, that's not good. Right. Can we look and stand in the middle and say, yeah, there's some bad people over there doing bad things I don't agree with, but there's also bad people over there doing bad things I don't agree with, and they want nothing more than us to keep fighting each other. And you'd be correct to say that, yeah, Israel is probably influencing a lot of influencers and a lot of the public narrative to heighten the focus on the CCP and communism. But likewise, I really believe that the CCP, especially with their hacking networks and everything and their bot networks, they also want to heighten the perception of Israel as being an enemy or the United States government as being an enemy. So we're being played by all sides. And that's why I really try to stay not neutral. I think there's really not, to me, like being neutral is in many ways somewhat cowardly. It's like, I don't want to take a side. I don't want to upset either side of this. So it's like, well, maybe if you're just a pacifist, but I think we have to be very vocal about what's going on. And so my position is not to be neutral, but to recognize that there are enemies on both sides that want to destroy America, right? The CCP doesn't want America to thrive and become a successful, even more successful superpower, okay? It's just how it is. But getting back into this, it's like, okay, well, to me, it just is odd that this guy has these ties to these agencies. But I want to take a step back and look at more of like, okay, what are the larger patterns that are emerging here? Because, and actually, I'll pull up a comment as I talk about this, but I really think that we have to be far more vigilant here in America, especially since I've seen Trump get into office. I think that a lot of people that say under Biden were prepping and preparing and worried about the fate of the country, they've kind of, since Trump got in, there's like, oh, great, Trump is in and everything is great. And there's going to be this bright, beautiful future under him. And I think that we can't let our guard down. Like, that's one thing, but we have to be vigilant. But this is one of the concerns, though, is that when I do shows like this and I say, hey, folks, look out, like I'm seeing some patterns that point to some frightening things. I see a lot of people come and say, look, you're just fear mongering and you're just such a Debbie Downer and you're so negative. And I thought, have you looked around at our country? Like, do you really think that our country is in a place where we're not going to have any war on American soil for the next 100 years? Like, do we really think that we're living in such a secure place in this world that we don't have to worry? That's just not me. I mean, I see threats all over, and I feel like it's, in a lot of ways, it's my responsibility to share this information with you and say, hey, we got to look out for this, you got to look out for that. And I'll pull up this one comment. Actually, to me, this comment is like the pinnacle of this, right? So this is on a video I did recently. It was America descends into chaos. Are you prepared? Right? Like, maybe you disagree with me by saying America's descending into chaos, but I think that America is descending into chaos. You look at like the No Kings riots, you look at the ICE, you look at the anti-immigration stuff. You look at even this shooting targeting first responders. These are things that you weren't seeing happening 50 years ago. I mean, this stuff is becoming so current. But here, this guy, Brian Pacino, which, Brian, I appreciate your feedback. I'm not like picking on you here. But he said, Seth, selling the fear. Now, I used to be a huge fan. Why don't you just go back to selling jewelry? You sound just like the mainstream media. Get off YouTube. Create some new content, Debbie Downer. So I always appreciate seeing these comments. I mean, I'm not emotionally hurt by it. I've got, a stronger sense of identity than that to be concerned by someone who I have no idea whether this is his actual photo or whether it's a bot account. But the thing is that I'm not selling fear. I'm trying to warn you, right? Because I see a lot of things happening that are concerning to me, and I think that we should be aware of those things. But I want to get back into this idea of taking a step further back, because The reality is there are a lot of nations around the world that want to see America completely laid to waste. Like it's just the reality of it. And I really do believe, especially since Trump got us involved with the Iran and Israel conflict, I think even more so that we should have a heightened sense that we could start seeing more and more attacks on American soil. Look at all the criminals, all of the terrorists that came across the border. There's more than enough people in this country that if they got the instruction from, say, the CCP or say from whatever organization is running these terror cells, whether they're Middle Eastern terrorists that are here waiting for the next terror attack, or maybe if they're Chinese soldiers or Russian soldiers or Venezuelan gang members or cartels, there's enough of them here. If they got the command, they could create absolute chaos. I mean, just take this one thing, right? This is supposedly one person started a fire and is shooting a couple of first responders. Imagine if that happened in 100 different cities. Like, just as one person, you go to Twitter, every other tweet is about this one situation in Idaho, which is supposedly one lone gunman. But how easy would it be for them to create that same scenario in 100 or even 1,000 different cities in America? Like, what would that be like if all of a sudden there were 1,000 of these same stories happening all at once? Like, it's highly probable. The reason why it hasn't happened yet is because the orders haven't been given to make it happen, right? And if this is an event where they are taking orders from higher up, what are the next steps, right? Because if there is a plan unfolding to create chaos across America, well, that's just one step in a much larger plan. So oftentimes, if you look at the theater of war and you look at these different stages, every stage creates the conditions for the next stage. So if there's an increase of just terror campaigns here in America, activated terror cells, what are they preparing for, right? It's a very important question for us to ask. Now, getting into the CCP and their motives, there's a few things I want to highlight, right? So for people that think that, oh, we're not really at war with China or whatever you want to think, we are very much so at war with China. It's just not the generation of war that we think it is. It's, where they're bringing tanks in and launching bombs and all that kind of stuff, right? The kinetic warfare. We're in a war right now with China. And this next thing here, I'll post, this completely validates that. So Chinese nationals charged in smuggling cases, right? Illinois researcher weighs in on agro-terrorism fears. So this is something that happened just in the past couple of weeks, where Chinese nationals, in multiple instances, right, were caught smuggling in potential agro-terrorism weapons. So here it goes. Multiple Chinese nationals have now been charged by federal authorities with smuggling a potential agro-terrorism weapon into the country. Those charges center on a fungus that can cause blight crops, right? It can kill crops, according to the DOJ, and can cripple food security and the economy. I don't think that people understand how significant this is. Now, one thing is that these Chinese nationals, I would bet, I would bet the barn that these Chinese nationals are not acting independently. These aren't just some random Chinese people that don't like America and are smuggling potential bioweapons in that will take out our crops. I would almost guarantee that these Chinese are acting on behalf of the Chinese Communist Party, that these are agents that are working to bring in these biological weapons that could be used to collapse our food supply. This is war, right? The question I have, though, I think they caught 3 of these different Chinese nationals. How many more didn't get caught? These are just the 3 that got caught. So were there, and again, if say you were the CCP and say you wanted to have your agents inside of America release some sort of, fungus, whatever, that can destroy your crops, and as they say in here, they can cripple the food security and the economy, would you just have 3 people do it? Like, would you say, okay, we're going to put all of our hope into these 3 people? Oh, they got caught. That sucks. No, I mean, look, if I was like a CCP general, I would be sending in 100 people to do this. And that's the question I have, is that if 3 got caught, how many didn't get caught, right? Because if you look at this, this is part of a bigger strategy of war, because they're not coming in here and say releasing some sort of biological weapon, like say releasing anthrax on the subway in New York City. They're potentially aiming to release a fungus that will destroy our crop yields. So this is a much bigger picture strategy, because if they can destroy our crop yields and they can create food shortages in America, create chaos. Imagine if you had that. So imagine if all of a sudden there was a blight, a kind of pandemic, whatever, where you're seeing that crops are just getting completely wiped out across America. And at the same time, you see that there's these terror cells being activated, not to mention what happens with the grid, which we'll get into. To me, these are all the early signs of a much more serious war. That's just my opinion on that. Now, getting into the grid, this is even more concerning. This is why, I would consider myself a hardcore prepper, as I worry about things like this. So this just came out. China's academic research, 500 plus papers on how to crash Western power grids. So it says cybersecurity researcher uncovers a stunning academic program, 367 Chinese papers targeting U.S. grids, 166 on European systems with chilling specificity on cascading failures and systemic collapse. Okay, so a cybersecurity researcher discovered these academic programs with 367 papers specifically detailing how to target the United States power grid with the goal of cascading failures and systematic collapse. It says sample study titles include Selection of Disruptive Nodes to Destroy Power Grid, and research on achieving, quote, the largest cascading failure under least node control using real U.S. grid data with close to 5,000 nodes. The papers detail malicious data injection attacks, optimal strategies for deliberately deleting nodes, and methods to trigger blackouts with minimal effort, all tested on actual Western infrastructure models rather than China's fundamentally different grid systems. So, this is for a very long time, and one of my greatest concerns is that we'd have some sort of grid down event here in America that could be very likely caused by the Chinese Communist Party. Now, am I throwing out that we might have our own, kind of rogue intelligence agencies and rogue players, operating within some of these other agencies that would do this? Of course, right? That's absolutely a potential. But here we have that this is China. Now, let's look at this continuing, because I've covered this extensively. This is an article from maybe earlier this year, but I know that this was discovered a couple of years ago. Hidden threats in our power grid, the Chinese transformer backdoor scandal. So this is really interesting. So it says America's critical infrastructure faces an unprecedented threat, and it's already installed in hundreds of locations across the nation. It says recent investigations confirm that Chinese manufactured power transformers, essential components of our electrical grid, have been discovered with hidden capabilities allowing remote shutdown from overseas. We have to realize how significant this is. So in the summer of 2019, federal authorities seized a massive 500,000-pound Chinese transformer at the port of Houston. Rather than delivering it to its intended Colorado substation, officials diverted it under escort to the Sandia National Laboratories for examination. What they discovered was alarming. Backdoor hardware deliberately inserted that would allow operators in China to remotely disable the transformer. Okay, so this is interesting because just after that discovery, this is back in 2019, so I think it was 2020, right here. So recognizing this as an existential threat to national security, the federal government declared a grid security emergency on May 1st, 2020. I think this is Trump, who signed the Executive Order 13920 to ban acquisition of certain foreign power equipment. So I remember when this happened, actually, when they discovered this and that Trump put a ban, basically not allowing any kind of hostile nations to have access to any of our grid equipment. Now, what's interesting is that I think it was on day one of Biden getting into the office. Though actually, let's see, was it May 1st, 2020? Yeah. So day one, I think day one or day two, Biden canceled that executive order. So the executive order that was put in place to not allow the Chinese Communist Party to manufacture or have access to the parts on our power grid, Biden canceled that executive order on day 1 or 2 of being in office, completely opening that back up again. So, look at this, the sober reality of this is that our power grid, as it is right now, the CCP has the ability to turn our power off remotely. They found a back door in this equipment. And keep in mind, like these 500,000 pound transformers, these are very expensive and timely to replace. You can't just like snap your fingers and replace all of them. So the fact that the CCP literally had Xi Jinping could be sitting there with a big red button that says US grid and could press that button to shut down our grid. Not to mention, if they really wanted to, they could use a tactical nuke, right? They could use a nuke to cause an EMP attack, right? So they could strategically launch like 3 nukes that detonate a certain height above the landmass of the United States of America, and those nukes would serve as an EMP. So they could there's even if they didn't have access to our grid in this way, they could still use technology we know that they have to completely destroy the grid here in America. So if you look at these things together, whether it is this terror attack that on the firefighters and policemen out in Idaho, you look at the attempted assassination of Trump at Butler, PA, and so many other things that are happening, right? Even the No Kings protests, which you could trace the funding back to the Chinese Communist Party. They were funding a lot of those protests. George Soros funding a lot of those protests. You can see that there are these patterns that show you that America is very vulnerable right now. And going back to the guy that left me the comment about selling fear, I'm like, what do you want me to talk about, right? Like, hey guys, everything's great. America has such a beautiful, bright future. There's no inflation, right? There's no Federal Reserve. Americans are just so happy and safe, and we've got no enemies. Gee golly, right? Is that what you want me to focus on, or would you rather me focus on this kind of information where I'm saying, hey, look, take it with a grain of salt. Don't get all caught up in fear and go do a bunch of irrational things, but like hope for the best, prepare for the worst. And if we don't talk about what the worst case scenario is, none of us are going to be prepared for it. It's just the reality. Now, what's also interesting is I've got a video here of some guy, I think that he's in the Army, and it's a minute long. I'll play this for you because there's something that he knows, right? Now, he could have just been lying and making something up to make a viral video. I don't know. It's a minute long. Listen to this and let me know what you think in the comments, okay?
Hey, I just wanted to get on here and say that, we just did the strikes on Iran. We just entered the war officially, so there's not a lot I'm allowed to say, but just for y'all's loved ones' sake, I hope y'all have some supplies. Like, I hope y'all got some a place to go, so some supplies, and things are gonna start getting crazy. So we've been eating a lot of lobster dinners recently, and if you know, you know. Y'all stay safe out there. This is not to scare anybody. This is just to let y'all know that things are about to get pretty wicked. So stay safe and watch out for each other. Amen.
So again, you could say maybe this guy is just trying to create fear, but I think there's something there, right? Like he's got the sense of like, okay, he knows something that I don't know. And also he mentioned the lobster dinners. I'm seeing there's been a lot of videos coming out, TikTok videos and whatnot, of the same thing, of troops being fed steak and lobster. And they're all basically saying the same thing, is that they feed us steak and lobster before war, right? Before being sent off to war. So could we be on the edge of some sort of war? I mean, you had Trump's ceasefire, which lasted, an hour, right? So as much as we love the idea of kind of everlasting peace in the Middle East and no threats to America, that's not the world that we live in right now, unfortunately. Now, just so you know, I know that as you probably know if you've watched the show, if this is your first time, now you know, I'm still working on my book, Prep Like Noah. Like we've been really busy with a lot of different projects. We're actually rebuilding the whole back end of our website and doing a lot of automations and everything. So we've been quite busy, but I'm still pushing forward the book, Prep Like Noah. Soon we'll have a lot of announcements around that. And I'm going to be doing a lot more content on preparedness. It's something that I've seen consistently when I've met you, whether at a Clay Clark event or something like that. you oftentimes say, oh, Seth, I love your prepping content. So I am going to be doing a bunch more prepping content. It's going to become central to a lot of what I'm doing with Man in America. Still covering a lot of the same things that you see me covering, but I've got some really exciting projects being built surrounding the idea of like building a community of preparedness. So that's all I'll say for now, but just know that content is coming. And just let me know, actually, if there are certain topics as it relates to prepping and preparedness, whether it's generators or water or food or security or anything, any like ideas, medicine, survival medicine, or how to prepare, how to get extra amounts of your daily meds in case you don't have access to them anymore. I'll be doing a ton of content on this. So just stay tuned for that, because it is coming. But just in the kind of grand scheme of things and summing up today, I think I've gone through. Oh no, I have one more thing to show you. Right. So on top of all this, we've got this little document right here, the National Blueprint for Biodefense. So I covered this with Dr. David Martin. I highly recommend you go. I did it maybe a couple of weeks ago. You can go find the interview. Highly recommend you go check out the interview. But this is a whole other thing, right? This is basically, if you remember Event 201, which was the event that they did prior to the pandemic, which basically kind of predicted everything that was going to happen, right, of the virus and everything around the world. They did the same thing, right? I think this is done within the DOJ. It says it's the report of the Bipartisan Commission on Biodefense. So this whole report, I'll kind of summarize it basically in a very basic way. It outlines a potential kind of terrorist event, okay, bioterrorism event. Basically, if I can find the exact page here to show you, here we go. Hey folks, I've got a quick but really important update. So right now, DC politicians are trying to kill the very tax credits that are helping bring manufacturing back from China and putting American workers on the job. These credits are fueling U.S. energy independence, rebuilding our supply chains, and hitting the Chinese Communist Party where it hurts. And look, this isn't theory. It's actually happening. We're talking real factories, real jobs right here on American soil. But if they repeal these credits, we're going to lose millions of jobs. We got over $1 trillion from our economy, and we hand China a massive win. So here's the deal. President Trump, don't let Congress pull the plug on America's comeback. Stand firm. Protect the energy tax credits. Keep putting America first. Okay, so keep in mind, Event 201, which is where they basically war gamed a scenario of a global pandemic hitting from a coronavirus. Okay, so this right here, it says the following hypothetical opening remarks by the chair of Congressional Joint Inquiry provide context to this report by portraying a biological attack sufficient to cause the catastrophic consequences warned of by the Bipartisan Commission on Biodefense. Okay, so jumping down into here, it says 9 weeks ago, this is their scenario, right? Now keep in mind that they're saying that this supposed bioterrorist attack would happen on July 4th, 2025. So again, my own recommendation, like for me, I'm having my own July 4th in my backyard. We're doing a pool party, fireworks, cookout, volleyball, the whole 9 yards. But if you're planning on going to some sort of massive July 4th event, I would just keep your head on a swivel, right? Be very careful, because here they're saying that this attack happened July 4th. It says, So it says 9 weeks ago, some nation or terrorist or group, we still don't know who, attacked the nation's capital and other U.S. cities with biological weapons as we celebrated Independence Day. The infectious agent they used killed at least 280,000 Americans and infected at least 400,000 throughout the country in a single day, in addition to the 200,000 dead and 800,000 sickened animals. These numbers will increase as the disease spreads. Many of our own colleagues and staff here in the Congress fell ill and died. Coordinated attacks in allied nations in the days that followed killed tens of thousands more. We are now hearing that the terrorists conducted smaller scale attacks in American cities and localities prior to the July 4th incidents to test our defense and gauge our responses. So again, here you have our own government doing another Event 201 type scenario to examine a potential biological attack on July 4th, where biological agents were released. And actually what David Martin said in our interview is he talked about how they actually have these pathogens that are blast resistant. So they could literally load these pathogens into a mortar, like a fireworks mortar shell, that when it explodes in the air, it actually shoots pathogens everywhere. Right? Kind of crazy but this technology in the interview with him, actually, I'll make sure I'll put the description, the link for you. So if you want to go watch that interview with David Martin, I highly recommend it. But he's explained that, and we looked at the patents together, that they can do this. So again, taking a step back, okay, we've got heightened potential of World War III in the Middle East that could absolutely pull in China, Russia, Iran, obviously, NATO, the United States. I mean, it's endless what could happen out of that. You've got the threat of some sort of potential attack on the grid at the hands of the CCP. You've also got the same threats that could be at the hands of just crooked people in the agencies, right? Our own deep state. Before Trump can kind of get rid of all of them, they're going to pull something that's going to leave the nation on its knees. That's a potential. You have these events like what we just witnessed in Idaho, where first responders are being shot and killed. So, and this is just, you have the protests, you have the anti-ICE protests happening across the nation. So again, I'm not telling you to live your life in fear. I'm just trying to communicate that if you're looking around soberly at this country, there are a lot of things that threaten the future of our country, and we just need to be aware of that. And that's why I will continue, and I'm going to be doing a bunch more on prepping, because I think it's, God gave me this opportunity to have millions of people that watch my shows. It's great, actually. Like I feel honored, but there's also a lot of pressure. And I think that one of the most important things I can do with this platform, on top of trying my best to give you truth and to point towards the importance of virtue and faith and all those things, is if I can use this platform to help more Americans, more God-fearing, patriotic Americans, to be that much more prepared so that we can get through a potential crisis or collapse or whatever it is that happens in this country. It's a really important thing for me to do, so I will continue doing that. So anyway, that sums up the report for today's show. Let me know in the comments what you think. I love reading your comments. I really do. Even the ones like, from this angry guy here. So Brian, who's really angry at me for selling fear. Like, I appreciate that feedback. And it's like, okay, maybe my shows have been too negative consistently. And so, okay, let me see if I can pull in some positive aspects. So I still take that, negative and positive comments are both helpful for me. Actually, the negative ones oftentimes are more helpful because I can see where I'm going off, or I can just say, yeah, this person's a lunatic and they're a troll and it doesn't matter. But Brian, I appreciate your comment. Thank you for that. So anyway, thank you for joining me today. It's been great doing these shows. I really love doing these live shows like this where I can just kind of walk you through this research. I hope it's been good for you. And I think tomorrow I've got a really good interview with Martin Armstrong that's publishing. I just finished up a little bit ago. So we've got a lot of good stuff happening. And just stay tuned, right? Stay tuned for what's going on. Make sure you're following me over on Twitter. It's at Man in America US. And if you're watching on Rumble, thank you for supporting free speech. If you're watching on YouTube, go watch on Rumble instead, where they support free speech. Make sure you hit that like button and share this content if it is important, or if you learned something. I'd really appreciate that. All right, thank you, take care, and God bless. Do you keep hearing more cases of your friends and family getting a life-threatening diagnosis of cancer? Or perhaps it's even happened to you? Well, the unfortunate reality is that turbo cancer is now a worldwide epidemic. But the question we should all be asking is, what can I do about it? Well, the good news is that there are therapies that are working and proven in thousands of clinical studies. So one study on PubMed found that breast cancer's growth rate dropped by 40% in only 24 hours after using red light therapy. Another study on prostate cancer found that 49% of the over 400 male participants went into remission with just one red light therapy session. A lymphoma cancer pilot study showed that 3 out of 3 of the patients became cancer-free. It sounds unbelievable, but it's true. And you can discover all this information and more in a special training program from investigative medical journalist Jonathan Otto, who will show you how you can use red light, including the specific wavelengths as proven by studies, for all different types of cancer, as well as tinnitus, weight loss, wrinkles, acne, dementia, cognitive function, depression, anxiety, long COVID, jab injuries, stem cell regeneration, lower back pain, sciatica, the whole array of autoimmune diseases, including thyroid disease, arthritis, arthritis, lupus, and gut disorders, and so much more. In fact, you can get your own in-home red light therapy device risk-free, as you're completely covered by a 60-day money-back guarantee and a 3-year warranty. On top of that, we've got financing options so you can get it now and pay later. And the best thing, folks, is that this technology has become amazingly affordable. It's way less than you'd expect, with the smaller units costing only a couple $100. So just go to myredlight.com to make sure you don't miss out this free special training program and claim the extremely limited time bonus gifts and discounts, which include an additional 10% off with the coupon code SETH. Again, go to myredlight.com to get access to the free training. And if you make a purchase, make sure you use a promo code SETH, that's SETH, to get an additional 10% off the already heavily discounted